In the previous lecture, we already executed a test that included an assertion. So we are now ready to start uploading them to App Center. Of course, the first thing that we will have to do is navigate back to one of our applications and go over to the Test tab. In here, after clicking the Start Testing Your App button, we will be able to start the 30-day free trial that App Center provides to us to test our application on real devices. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. Right here, I am going to start my 30-day trial, and immediately we are going to be able to create a new test run. Here is where eventually App Center is going to provide me with the actual command that I have to perform through its CLI that we already installed in this section to upload my tests. Now, in case you're wondering, just before moving forward in here, your 30-day trial did indeed start. So you have 30 days to test the test capabilities of App Center. In fact, if you navigate back to your organization here in App Center and navigate over to Manage and navigate over to Billing, you're going to see that the test is indeed on a 30-day trial. After these 30 days are up, you won't be able to test anymore until you decide to pay for that service. But for now, we're going to be able to navigate back to our application, go back to test, and start testing our application, creating a new test run. And in here, we will be able to select some devices where we want our application to run. In this case, I selected an iOS device, so I will of course see iOS devices. And I can select, for example, the iPod Touch, one of the iOS devices that has the least power, so I can select this one, and maybe select one of the devices that has the most power, for example, an iPhone XS, and see whether or not our application runs correctly on both of them. And maybe just throw a device with an earlier version of iOS. Notice that there are plenty of devices with plenty of iOS versions. Right now the newest is 12.4, so I don't know, maybe select one with iOS 11, maybe an iPhone 8. So I will select these three devices. You could of course select more. Then in here I am going to configure my run. And in here I want to configure a unique test series that is going to be test. And in the next section we're going to cover a little bit more about how is it that these tests are going to be related to our test branch. But for now I will just have this test series. I can change the system language and the test framework. Of course, in our case, that is going to be Xamarin.UI test. And click on next. Finally, in here, we're going to get the actual command that we have to execute. Of course, we see the prerequisites, but we've already met them. We have Node.js and we have the App Center command line interface installed, so I can navigate over to running the tests. And in here, we're going to see this command. This one is the one that we have to execute. So I'm going to copy this to the clipboard and I am going to open a new terminal instance. And from here, I am going to navigate into my iOS project. So currently I'm already on my Redbooks directory. And if I execute ls, I see inside the iOS directory. So I am going to cd into that directory. Now that I am here, I can paste that command. However, before you execute this, notice that we have to change a couple of things. The path to the IPA file that we have in here that is currently just set to a placeholder, and the path to UI test build directory. So here I have to change what is being written. So let's start with that path to file.ipa location. Where do we find that IPA file? And currently I am here already on my iOS directory on Finder. But no matter how much you look for it, you probably won't find it, because by default there is no IPA file being generated, at least in the debug setting that we have used so far. So what you would have to do is navigate over to Visual Studio. And inside of Visual Studio, right-click on the iOS project, select Options, and navigate over to iOS IPA options. In here, make sure that you select Build iTunes Package Archive, which is IPA, for the debug configuration. And notice that you have to select the iPhone platform. Since we are going to be using an iPhone platform, by the way, you'll also have to navigate back to compiler, where notice that there is no more Test Cloud option. If we switch to iPhone Simulator, enable Test Cloud is still here, but if we switch over to iPhone, it is not. So just make sure that you add that as well. Semicolon and enable Test Cloud. And now make sure that you select the debug configuration and target an actual device, a device that you can simply connect to your computer. So this can be an iPhone, a new iPod Touch, or an iPad. And now right click on your project and build the project. Now this debug build targeting an iPhone is actually going to create an IPA file. So where is it? I am going to navigate back to my Redbooks iOS directory, where I am currently located on, as well on the terminal. And the first thing that we have to do, and I'm going to set that in double quotes, is navigate over to the bin folder. So we have to get inside of the bin folder. Then inside of the iPhone folder, because remember that this build was built for iPhone, not for iPhone Simulator. And inside we have been using the debug setting. So I will access the debug folder. And inside there is actually a device builds folder. So this one is the one that I have to also use, device builds. And inside there is yet another folder, and inside of that folder there is an IPA file. This one is the one that we have to pass. So after device builds, iPhone 10.6 to 13.0 in my case, and just pass the name of the file, redbooks.ios.ipa. That is the path to the IPA file. Now let's take a look at the path to UI test build directory. And we're going to start back in the redbooks.ios directory. From here, I am first and foremost going to have to navigate back to the previous directory, over to the directory where we can find the .test folder. So navigate outside of it and into redbooks.tests. Inside of this folder, we're also going to find a bin folder and a debug folder. Again, debug is the one that we're going to be using. So bin and debug. This is the build configuration that we have to use. So with this set, we can execute the command. We are going to see something like this. And by the way, I had an additional / at the beginning of bin, so the file wasn't being found. But notice that the test is going to be prepared, some arguments are going to be validating, eventually the application is going to get uploaded. So I'm just going to wait for the upload to finish. After the files have been uploaded, notice that a new test run is started with a test ID that we can see in here on the devices that we selected, and eventually we're going to see the test status. So here we have successfully uploaded our test. In fact, if we navigate back to App Center, we're going to see this test running. And I can select it to check the progress, the same thing actually that we would see over on the terminal. On the terminal, we're going to see these be updated every 10 seconds. Of course, over on App Center, we're going to see it just waiting for the devices. So I'll just wait for the devices and show you the results once we have them. After a while, we will be able to see the result of the test. And I know this failed, but let's overlook that fact for just a second. I am going to select this test, the one that we know exists, app navigates to login. So there is one successful thing in here. We are seeing all of the tests that exist on our test project. And if we select this, we are actually able to see a screenshot of our application. And we see that the login actually did happen. So something must be wrong with our test somewhere, because we see that the login did happen. We see the login button in here. And even further proof that our test is being run successfully somehow is that over in the logs, we can see the message that from Visual Studio we decided to present when the test fails. So indeed, the test failed, but we see that somehow it succeeded in being executed. So far, the assertion is returning false instead of the expected true, which we did see happen locally when we executed the test on our computer, on our simulator. But so far, I want you to focus on the fact that we have just executed our tests in the cloud with more than one device, in our case 3 devices, which I can see in here. And you can see that even if we are not taking a screenshot ourselves, App Center is going to take a screenshot as soon as the test finishes. And it may give me a bit of a hint about what may be going on in here. What I think may be happening is that the assertion is being executed before the login button is actually presented. And the reason why I think that may be the case is because if I navigate to these 2 tests, I still see this add button, which shouldn't appear in the login page. It only exists on the main page, and this happens both on this iPod Touch and on this iPhone 8, although in here it seems that it is being already hidden by the navigation to the login page. So I will definitely have to look at that, but hopefully you see that throughout this lecture we have successfully uploaded our iOS test over to App Center and executed it. Not entirely successful because the test failed, but successful because we see the test being run and the result of that test happening now in the cloud. Now in the next lecture, I am going to upload the test to our Android application here in App Center. The process is going to be very similar. The only real difference is going to be that we will have to point over to an APK file instead of an IPA file which we uploaded for the iOS scenario.